Hello, everyone. Welcome to week 3 of online learning. This is your notes on the introduction to the Kingdom Animalia. We're going to be spending 2 weeks on these notes, or on this chapter. It's chapter 5 in your textbook. And then the last chapter on animals will be lesson 6, which is about animal behavior. And then we're going to be done with our green notes packet and the book, and we're going to be moving on. So this is all about the animal kingdom, and you guys are going to enjoy this because you're more familiar with the animal kingdom. Some of you are fans of watching nature shows on television, and you might know a lot of this information already, and that's great. Some of you may be very unfamiliar with some of these animals, and that's awesome too, because I like to introduce you to new and exciting things. So we have lots of videos for you, which is suitable for the online learning. The only bummer is this is when we do our animal labs, where you get to observe some of these organisms in person. The honors would have been doing a dissection. So unfortunately, we are not going to be able to experience that, but I'm going to try my best to give you the best experience as I can. All right, so notes. This kingdom is very diverse. A jellyfish is an animal, a bird is an animal, a lion is an animal, an earthworm is an animal, and so are humans. And we're very, very, very different. It's a very diverse kingdom, but what we share in common are 6 characteristics. That's what this first page is in your notes. This is page 10 in your green packet. If you're not using your green packet, if you don't have it, again, you want to write down key vocabulary terms in your science learning journal. Okay, so you have those written down. You can have them in front of you when you do the activities or when you do the reading works questions. Okay, and then we're going to have a quiz on this next week. So you can always use those to help you with your quiz. So I highly recommend taking notes still, even though we're not in class. All right, all animals have cells, obviously, because they're alive. But what they do have in common with one another is they all have eukaryotic cells, which means they have a nucleus and membrane-bound organelles. They have no cell wall. They're all multicellular, and they share some common organelles in the animal cell. So this is what, if we looked at one of my cells, we looked at an earthworm cell, they're going to have these things in common. So they don't have a cell wall like plants do. They just have this cell membrane on the outside. You don't need to draw this cell. We're going to learn more about the organelles later on, but we wanted to introduce you to them so you're familiar with some stuff. The cell membrane controls what comes in and out, similar to the cell wall, but it's not going to give it that structure. So animal cells are more flexible. They also have this thing called the lysosome. The lysosome is responsible for breaking down toxins and other waste products within the cell, and plants don't have these. I think the reasoning behind that is the fact that animals are consumers. So we're eating food when plants make their own food. And since we're eating food, we're going to naturally ingest toxins and waste products. So our cells need to have these lysosomes so they can process out those waste products and those toxins and get them out of our body. All right. We have a couple other things that plant cells don't have, but for now, we'll get more into those later. But those are the main things that all animals have in their animal cells. All right. How do they get their energy? All animals are heterotrophs. Specifically, they are consumers, meaning they need to eat something to get their energy. Remember, primary consumers are herbivores. Secondary consumers are going to be a combination of omnivores or small carnivores. Tertiary consumers are at the top, and they can be omnivores as well, or large carnivores. But they're at the top of the food chain. They're the ones that aren't really getting eaten by other animals. And you're going to find all 3 levels of these in the animal kingdom. Okay? All animals have specialized parts. This is a term that's in your book called differentiation. This is when cells are specialized to do a certain job. So they're specialized in the shape that they have, they're specialized in the organelles that they have inside of them, etc., because they need to do certain things. So nerve cells, for example, that make up our brain and our nervous system, have kind of like a funky shape compared to other cells. They have these long kind of finger projections that come out on the edge, and that's how they send messages to one another because that's their purpose, is to send messages. Our red blood cells are like a disc shape, and they're purposely shaped like that so they can flow quickly through our bloodstream, through our veins, and they also need to carry oxygen. Our muscle cells um, have a long shape so they can contract, and they're also full of mitochondria. If you remember, mitochondria is the organelle that does, um, I'm sorry, it's really late, cellular respiration, which is how we get our energy. So the muscle cells are going to be filled with mitochondria because they need a lot of energy. And if you are exercising a lot or training for a sport, those muscle cells will actually make more mitochondria because they need more energy. All right. So that's differentiation. And this is going to be in all animals, not just humans. I'm using humans as an example because we're familiar. But if you think of something like a sponge, so not a sponge that we wash our dishes with, but a sea sponge. So yes, SpongeBob is based off of a real animal, but they don't look like SpongeBob. I'll show you some pictures and I have a video on them in one of our activities this week. But anyways, a sponge has lots of specialized cells. They don't have organs or organ systems like we do, but they do have different cells that do different jobs. And that's because they're an animal and they need to perform different functions. All right, movement. All animals can move. All right, run, fly, swim, whatever that movement is, they can all move. A few animals can only move for a portion of their life. So, for example, coral that make up coral reefs and sponges, you're going to find again in marine environments, only move during their larva stage. So, that's in their very, very beginning parts of their life. They'll swim around in the ocean, they're super, super tiny, and then they find a home and they permanently attach there when they become an adult. So there are a handful of animals that only move for a portion, and then for the rest of their life, they're fixed in one spot. All animals maintain homeostasis. Homeostasis is a term that we've discussed many times throughout the year. It just means it's maintaining a balance inside. That could pertain to lots of different things. All living things maintain homeostasis. But more specifically, all animals maintain their body temperature. So there's two different kinds of animals. Endotherms, meaning they maintain their body temperature inside, like an elephant or a human or a dog or a cat. Our endotherm's body temperature basically stays the same temperature. And if we get hot, we do things naturally to cool ourselves down. If we get cold, we do things naturally to heat ourselves up. But generally, we're going to stay the same temperature unless we have a fever or something. Ectotherms, they're cold-blooded, meaning their body temperatures depend on their surroundings. So their body temperatures can fluctuate a lot more than endotherms can, but they still need to keep it within a certain range. So they're going to do certain things to help them, like bask in the sun if they're cold. If they're too hot, they need to move out of the sun or go down underground. And if they can't do that, if they can't get out of the sun, then they might not survive. So if you have any cold-blooded animals, if anybody has a snake or anything at their house, they know that they have to have a heat lamp, and that's for them to warm themselves up during certain times of the day. All right, reproduction. All animals reproduce sexually. Again, to refresh your memory, sexual reproduction is when there is a combination from two different individuals. So the offspring are not identical. The offspring are a combination of the genes from both parents. This gives animals an advantage because this gives genetic variation, which is going to help with natural selection. If you guys remember natural selection, survival of the fittest, you need that in a species to help them survive if things go bad in the environment. But being able to reproduce asexually can give some advantages as well. So there are a large number of animals that can also reproduce asexually. And that's when it's one parent and then the offspring are going to be genetically identical to the parent. So we've talked about this before, starfish. I showed you the video, if you remember, of the starfish fragmentation and how one limb of the starfish can just regrow into a whole new starfish. It's really cool. If you don't remember that from class or maybe you weren't there, Google that. Look up on YouTube, starfish reproduction by fragmentation. There's some pretty cool videos out there. And I might even be able to show you one in some of the videos coming up in the next couple of weeks. Also, budding. This is a hydra and coral polyps reproduce by budding as well. So do jellyfish. That's when the parent can kind of grow little mini offspring off of their body, and then they detach and they can continue growing on their own. All right, animal diversity. So this is first talking about their symmetry. Body symmetry is just how the animal's body parts are arranged. All right. The first type is called asymmetry. That just means that animal has no symmetry. So a sponge, this is a picture of a sponge. They have no symmetry, meaning they don't have any matching sides. They can be all different shapes, and there's no kind of pattern to it. Radial symmetry is when the body parts are arranged around a central point. So it can look like a wheel, like spokes on the wheel. Here's a coral polyp. There's a central point, and then their tentacles kind of go around that point. Same with jellyfish. You can see it's circular. There's a central point, and then their tentacles kind of hang down. The starfish look like a star, obviously. Starfish, echinoderms, which is this is the phylum that starfish are under. That's like starfish and sea urchin, sand dollars. They also have radial symmetry. So there's this central point, and then the limbs grow off of that central point. Bilateral is when it can be divided into two, like a book, and each side would have the same parts. So two antennae, two matching wings, human, two arms, two legs, two eyes. The mouth is the same on both sides, two ears, etc. If you folded it in half, they're going to match left, right, mirror images. All right, I have some pictures here, so maybe guess the symmetry before I put the answer up. This is a sea slug. He's bilateral. You could, take a line, draw it from top to bottom, and you're going to see he's got matching on both sides. Sea fan, asymmetrical, no symmetry. This is a really kind of funky looking starfish. That's a real animal, by the way. They're crazy looking. Radial. Okay. All right, so we're going to briefly talk about classification of animals this week, and then we're going to get more into details about this next week. So the two main groups of animals are vertebrates and invertebrates. Vertebrates have a backbone, invertebrates do not have a backbone. And then within this category, there are a bunch of different phylums, and then under this category, there's actually only one main phylum, and then they break apart into the classes. So that's what we're going to talk about next week. Right now, we're just going to talk about the difference between invertebrates and vertebrates. So this starts at the top of page 11, if you have your green packet. Vertebrates make up more than 95% of the animals. This is an older graphic, but it's more than 90%, 5% of the animals on Earth are invertebrates. So it's a huge group of animals, very, very, very diverse, so many different, millions and millions of different species, A lot of them we haven't even fully discovered or fully understand, especially when it comes to all of the insects, because this is where the insects fall. They're invertebrates. Okay. Um, General information, again, about 97% of animals on Earth are invertebrates. Some general examples are going to be our insects, worms, clams, lobsters, coral, um, jellyfish, butterflies, right? All these guys are invertebrates. Okay, a praying mantis, an earthworm. This is a monarch butterfly. All right, beetles. There's something like, I can't remember. It's like 55,000 different species of beetles. It's crazy. There's so many different invertebrates. All right, invertebrate anatomy. So again, they don't have a backbone. You're going to see all three body symmetries in this grouping of animals, meaning some of them are radial, like here, like this polyp. Some of them are bilateral. Some of them are asymmetrical. Okay. They have a very simple nervous system, meaning none of them have a brain like we do. They don't have complex organ systems like we do either. It's more simple. Some of them have an exoskeleton. An exoskeleton is a hard outer covering for protection. So insects like the bee, this is a dragonfly, here's a centipede. These are all animals with exoskeletons. Another example of an exoskeleton is lobsters and crabs that you have to crack open when you eat them. That's a more serious exoskeleton. It's a lot harder than necessarily a bumblebee, but they're the same. That's an exoskeleton. That's different than a shell. There's some invertebrates that are soft bodied and they protect themselves by making a shell. So these are going to be like clams, mussels, snails, right? That's not considered an exoskeleton. It's just called a shell. And then some are soft bodied. They don't live in anything. They don't have any kind of protection. So they usually have some other defense mechanism like stinging. Okay. And some of them, the echinoderms, those are the starfish and sea urchin and sand dollars. They do have an endoskeleton like we do, but it's not made out of bones. It's made out of a totally different material. All right, reproduction. Invertebrates can reproduce sexually because they're animals, because all animals can reproduce sexually, but many can also reproduce asexually. In the means that we talked about before, budding or fragmentation. This is a flatworm, just gives you the graphic. We've talked about fragmentation before. A lot of marine animals, when they reproduce sexually, they actually just release those gametes into the water, and then those cells will meet in the water, and then the larva will form, and they usually live for a certain period of time. It's like free swimming larvae until they start forming their into the adult version. So this can get very, very complicated. We're not going to get into detail. Just know that invertebrates can reproduce both sexually and asexually. All right, the next grouping are the vertebrates. These are animals with a backbone. General information, they're usually the dominant animals of an ecosystem. They're larger, they're more mobile. A lot of times they're higher up on the food chain. So examples are going to be humans, birds, turtles, lemurs, sharks, fish, right? Lions, tigers, bears. These are all vertebrates. Anything that has that internal skeleton is a vertebrate. So special things about their anatomy, they have a backbone and an internal bony skeleton. All vertebrates have this. They have a complex brain and skull, or it's also called a brain case, that protects that brain. And that brain case is made out of 8 separate bones that fuse together when we're born. They're actually separate. That's why you have little soft spots in your head. And they fuse together to protect that brain, because that brain is one of the reasons why these are the more dominant animals in an ecosystem. And they're all bilateral. There's no other body symmetry in the vertebrate grouping. These are some terms that you would have needed to know when we did our animal lab. So not really going to probably need to know them now since we're not going to do that. Although we're going to try to do something similar, but I don't know if you need to know this. But anyways, anterior refers to like the head end of the body. Posterior is the tail end. Dorsal is the backbone, and then ventral is the belly. Okay, so that's going to be in different spots depending on the animal. Just think anterior is head, posterior is tail, dorsal is back, ventral is belly. Okay, and then reproduction, vertebrates all reproduce sexually. There are a very, very small amount of vertebrates that do have kind of strange adaptations to reproduce asexually, but in general, they all reproduce pretty much only sexually. And it's either going to be by laying eggs. This is going to vary depending on the class of animal. Some of them lay eggs with hard shells. Some of them lay, like fish, lay eggs that are more like water-based and gelatinous. And then some give birth to live young. All right, and that's it for the notes for this week. Next week, we're going to get into the phylums. All right. Excuse me. And again, if anybody has questions, please reach out. And I hope everyone's doing well. Bye.